Today's lesson is all about esters. Esters contain the functional group carbonyl bonded to an oxygen atom. So it's going to look kind of like an ether, kind of like an aldehyde. It actually is made from an alcohol and a carboxylic acid, and we'll look at that in a couple of slides later. But it's important for you to note that this little group of atoms is going to be bonded in the middle of two essentially carbon chains, one on each side. So to tell the difference between the carbon chains, we kind of denote them R and R, what we call prime. So the R group is that red arrow. So the first part of the name is going to come from this side of the molecule, the one that's connected to that oxygen. The second part of the name comes from this side of the molecule that's connected to that C double bond O. Okay, so the first part comes from the alcohol part, which is this part over here, and then we add that YL to the name, and the second part comes from the carboxylic acid part, which is why we have that carbonyl group, and then we take off the end of the acid name and we add the NO8 instead of anoic acid. Okay, so let's take a look at a few here. Okay, so taking a look at the first example here, if I'm counting my number of carbons, the first carbon here is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I've got 5 carbons on that side. And if I take a look at the other side, I'm going to count that carbon that has the double bond O, and that gives me 2 carbons on that side. So remembering that I always name this part first, so that means the 5 is going to end in the YL, and then the 2 part of the name is going to end in the NO8. So that means I'm going to have pentyl, and then 2 is ethyl, so pentyl ethanoate. And again, it's a 2 part to the name, so there's like a little space in between that pentyl ethanoate. Okay, looking at the next one, I've got 3 carbons next to that oxygen. So that is going to give me that pentyl, sorry, not pentyl, propyl. And then on the other side, I've only got the 1 carbon, so that's going to give me the methanoate. So when I put the name together, I end up with propyl methanoate. Okay, again looking at the next one, written a little bit differently, but the same idea. So I only have this time 1 carbon here. So that is my methyl. And I have 1, 2, 3 carbons on this side, so that's my propanoate. So that means the name is going to be methylpropanoate. Okay, so we're just kind of following the same thing over and over again. So finding the alcohol side, again, 1, 2, 3 carbons there. So that is again a propyl. And then over on this side, 1, 2, 3 carbons there. So that is again a propyl or a propanoate. So this one is propyl propanoate. Okay, so 2 parts to the name, 2 sides to the molecule every time. So just like we were discussing, the 2 sides to the molecule actually come from the 2 different molecules that were used to make the ester. So in the carboxylic acid, I had that C double bond O OH, and in the alcohol, I had the OH group. But what actually happens is when I put in an acid catalyst, so unfortunately we're not in class, otherwise we would be doing an experiment where we were making these esters. So I add in the two organic molecules. So I take a carboxylic acid and I take an alcohol, and then I add in a super strong acid, and I heat it up. And what happens is this OH from the carboxylic acid comes off and the H from the alcohol, and it actually creates water and kind of sandwiches the other two pieces of the molecule together. So I get that alcohol piece, so that O still belongs to that alcohol piece, and then I get the carboxylic acid piece that's left. So those were the two parts that we were naming on the last slide. So the alcohol part that got the YL part of the name, and the carboxylic acid part that got the NO8 part of the name. Okay, so that's kind of why we have two parts to that molecule. It was formed from two different molecules, a carboxylic acid and an alcohol. Okay, that's called an esterification reaction. So what we're talking about is esterification, the production of esters. Okay, so if we practice making a couple esterification reactions, the first thing we're going to do is chop off that water, remembering that it's the H from the alcohol and the OH from the carboxylic acid that's going to come off. So that is going to make my H2O as part of my product. So it's important that you remember to put that water in there. And then the rest of it, I'm literally just going to sandwich the molecule together. So I've got the carboxylic acid part, which is 2 carbons long with the double bond O, and then that bond comes off at that angle, and then I'm just going to sandwich in the rest of the alcohol part there, so the O and the C, and then of course filling in my H's gives me my ester. So this particular ester was formed from ethanoic acid, so the green part to the name. So this was ethanoic acid reacted with the yellow part to the name, which was methanol. So when I put it together, I get the yellow part of the name, which is methyl. And then I get the green part of the name, ethanoate. Okay, so again, looking at condensed structures for that, same plan. So we're still going to strip off the OH and the H from the alcohol, and I'm going to get the water, and then I'm going to sandwich the other two pieces together. So CH3, C double bond O, O, CH3. Okay, so looking to name that molecule, again, I'm taking the yellow side, so the alcohol side. It has 1 carbon, so that means it's methyl. And then taking the green side has 2 carbons, so it's ethanoate. Okay, important to note that acetic acid is ethanoic acid. Okay, so we learned that in carboxylic acid part. You will not need to remember that. As long as you can count the carbons and know that that's ethanoate, then you're good to go. Okay, so the last example is just doing it strictly from the names. So remembering what we were doing, we were taking the alcohol part of the name as the yellow part, and the carboxylic acid part of the name as the green part. I know that that is going to produce me propyl pentanoate. And of course, don't forget your water. So water is also produced in the reaction. Okay, so hopefully that helps clear up how to create esters and draw esterification reactions. Just to note, hydrolysis is actually the reverse of esterification. So if I wanted to reverse the reaction, it's called a hydrolysis reaction. So I'm actually going to be putting the OH back onto the acid, and I'm going to be putting the H back onto the alcohol. So taking my ester and producing again the carboxylic acid and the alcohol. Okay, so let's talk about properties for a second. Again, it's got that C double bond O, so it is a polar molecule. But remembering that carboxylic acids had the full OH on the end, so they had hydrogen bonding, and the alcohols had hydrogen bonding. So esters are polar, but not as polar as carboxylic acids and alcohols. Okay, because of that, they have weaker intermolecular forces, so that's kind of what makes their melting points and boiling points lower. So melting and boiling are lower than carboxylic acids and alcohols, but higher than all of the others. Okay, again, they don't have that hydrogen bonding, so they're less soluble in water, but they still dissolve. Okay, so they're still soluble, but they don't have hydrogen bonding from one molecule to the next. Where in our everyday life? They actually occur naturally in plants, just like aldehydes did. They are responsible again for the odors of fruits and flowers. So again, this comes down to that essential oils kind of idea. So when you smell the smell of apple or the smell of banana, that's actually an ester that you're smelling. We can make them synthetically, and actually most candy has these synthetic esters added as their flavors. And they can also be made synthetically for perfumes and different cosmetics. So those are usually not natural ones. The banana smell, just some interesting ones. You can look them all up. There's a ton of them. The banana is 3-methyl-butyl ethanoate. So this is just a branch on the chain. Apple is methylbutanoate, so that's smell of apple. You can make that if you make methylbutanoate. And again, I really wish we were in class because this is a really fun lab to do, where we create esters and make the room smell like all kinds of things. So unfortunately, we're not going to get to do that, but you still need to kind of understand how esters are made and named. So I've given you a little bit of practice, so naming some esters and then drawing a few and then doing some esterification reactions. Okay, so our team meeting this week is at 1:30, hopefully tomorrow. Hopefully I will be able to make it there on time. I have a staff meeting right before, so it may take a few more minutes for me to get there. Okay, good luck with your esterification practice and your drawing and naming of esters.